Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be reacting to 5-star reviews of The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. If you watch my Devils review or my most recent wrap up, then you'll know that I did not like this book. In fact, I disliked it so much that I gave it a 1 star, which is pretty much unheard of as it relates to Joe Abercrombie. I have read 10 of this man's books and pretty much every single one of them was a 5 stars, and there were like a few 4.5 stars. So that goes to show you how high the quality was in that broader first law world. Love those books so much, even the ones that were maybe not as good as some of the others. Like overall, the reading experience is incredibly rewarding and the consistency these days are very high. That's why I was completely shocked when this book came out and I absolutely hated it. Not only because I just didn't like the story or the characters, I also just did not like the writing. But if you looked at Goodreads and, other review sites, you would think that this was the best book that has ever been written. So I haven't done a reacting to video in a while, and I thought this one would be a good one to do, given that I had such a different experience to the majority of people. I asked my friend to pick 10 random reviews, so I'm going to read through them in this video. Disclaimer as always, nothing against these people. This is just one random person's opinion, talking about other random people's personal opinions. Nothing against these individuals. If I make any comments, it's just a bit of light relief. Genuinely, I don't care what people think. You're entitled to have your own opinions. This is just for fun and for entertainment. At the time that I am filming this video, The Devils is currently a 4.32 on Goodreads, which is extraordinarily high. Extraordinarily high. So that in mind, let's jump into the first one. And if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my laptop where I'm reading the reviews. Okay. First one. This is a bit of a long one. The Devils is perhaps Abercrombie's best yet. Is that too bold to say? Yes, it most certainly is. And what on earth are you talking about? I'm a fan, a big fan, but this book hit different. Maybe it's because of our current climate and our desperate need for hope, which is what the story is all about. Hope, faith, and found family. Yes, it's dark and gritty, duh, but there's a sincerity running throughout. The characters, I can't even begin. What an odd bunch, an odd but totally lovable bunch. Why does this person not use any full stops? I don't understand. The cast is huge, but the switches between POVs were seamless and easily distinguishable. They only use commas. This is really bizarre. Guys, can we please use basic punctuation? What is this? This is dark and bloody but feels lighthearted in a way his other novels don't. Yeah, because it's so stupid. It's so laughably bad. That's why it's so funny, because it's just like such a far cry from what he normally writes. Humour has always been a tool in Abercrombie's arsenal, but in The Devils it's turned up a few notches, not in a good way. The cast of characters almost sounds like the start of a bad joke. Yes, and that's not a good thing, folks. That is not a good thing. There is a way to do that, but I don't think he did it well in this book at all. And I'd warn, if you're not a fan of comedic fantasy, maybe this ain't the one for you. I love comedic fantasy. Part of the reason why I love grimdark actually is because there's often quite dark, cutting, sarcastic humour. I love that stuff. I eat it up. But in this one, the humour fell so flat in so many ways, and I can't believe people are praising it that much. It's wholly unlike anything he's written before. This was a fast-paced, entertaining read with some of the most charming characters. Really? I've ever read about. I did do that weird laughing out loud, but it's more of a snort noise throughout. I cannot thank Gollance enough for the chance to read this early. A signed proof and a PR box full of goodies. Weird way to propose, but I do. And there you have it, folks. There you have it. This is what this reader got. I cannot thank Gollance enough for the chance to read this early. A signed proof and a PR box full of goodies. There's a reason why publishers do this, and it's because whether you like to admit it or not, it is going to impact how you review the book. You're not going to review a book negatively if you receive all those things. Are you? Like, realistically, are you? They're very tactical in who they send these things to, right? It tends to be people with bigger followings, and it's a very smart marketing tactic, and it is also incredibly dishonest. Now, I'm not saying that this person is lying. Obviously, I'm not saying that. They might have actually genuinely enjoyed the book. But I think to say that this is better than his other stuff is one of the most ridiculous things I've heard this week. And I say this week because we hear ridiculous things every week in the news, in everyday life. And I think this might top it, to be completely honest. That is wild. Absolutely wild. Okay, let's move on. Hear me out. What if Joe Abercrombie wrote The Avengers but full of monsters? Because nobody's ever tried that before, right? This is a particular kind of trope in grim dark fantasy that I really detest now, because it keeps being done and there's no kind of original take on it. There's no new fresh take on it. And I'm not enjoying the way grim dark fantasy is going. There is a particular subsection of grim dark fantasy that tries to use a very specific type of humour that I personally don't think is very witty or charming or intellectual. It's just like really silly humour that feels really out of place. And unfortunately, that is very present in this book. It's not present in Joe Abercrombie's other books because the humour is very intelligent, it's very witty, quippy, it's great, it's so enjoyable to read. But the humour is really dumbed down in my opinion. I think he's trying to target a very specific type of audience, and I think, you know, he probably successfully did that. And I think it's very telling that this person wrote, you know, The Avengers but full of monsters, because this book has a movie deal. And it does feel like the book was written solely for that reason. We'll come more onto that later on, I'm sure. Let's go. It takes a while to settle into the tone and pacing of this one. It isn't First Law, but it is 100% Abercrombie character-driven goodness. Hard disagree. My only caveat is that if you don't like the humour in his other stories, this book will be torture for you. And I also hard disagree with this, because the humour in his other books is so much better. It's so intelligent. As I said, it's very dry, it's very witty. Sometimes you might even miss the humour because it's so sarcastic that it kind of might go over your head. But in this book, it's so obvious. It just kind of resorts to the most lamest jokes that you could possibly use. I mean, I said in my review, the guy does dick jokes and fart jokes in an adult fantasy book. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? It's infantile. It's super childish. And again, there's a way to do like childish humour in a way that is like satisfying to read, but unfortunately that was not the case in this book. And the characters in this book, I can't even remember one character. I read this book like less than a month ago, and I literally cannot remember one character. Whereas I can name you 10 characters right now from First Law. So to say that the characters in this book are even remotely similar to the characters in his other books is honestly quite insulting. Moving on. This book was my introduction to Joe Abercrombie, and let me tell you, I had a blast. From the characters and their development, the world building, the political intrigue, and the comedy. This was easily one of my favourite reads of the year. Wow. These characters were hilarious, and their journey from the holy city to Troy was amazing. It really gave me League of the Extraordinarily Gentlemen vibes, with each character having their own cool and unique ability. We're dealing with a vampire, a werewolf, a magician, a pirate, an immortal soldier, and a priest, all guiding our main protagonist to her rightful throne. This was a solid 5 out of 5 for me, and I see why Joe Abercrombie is praised, because this boom was fire. First Law trilogy, here I come. And this is a really interesting one, because this person obviously hasn't read his other stuff. And I think if this is your first Abercrombie, then I think, you know, I could see why you might enjoy it, because you have no comparison point. And this to me is just so vastly different from First Law. Like, I just do not think you can compare them, in my opinion. They are just like completely different in terms of how they're written. Even though he uses similar tropes, the way he fleshes those tropes out is just fundamentally different. I mean, obviously we only have one book with this book right now, but I think I already have a sense of where the series is going to go, to be completely honest. Maybe I should do like a predictions video or something, but I have zero intent of reading the later books. But I think if this is your first entry path into Joe Abercrombie, I think you're more likely to get on better with it than somebody who's maybe, you know, an uber fan of his older stuff. The other point I want to add, that if you like this Abercrombie book, I will say that I'm not sure if that will necessarily mean you will like his other stuff, because the First Law world is much slower. The humour is very different. The characters, I would say, are very different, even though there are some similar character types. So I will be very interested to hear people who started off with the Devils, like what their experience is with First Law, because they're nothing alike. They're so vastly different that, yeah, I'm curious if people will get on with that series after reading this one as their first Abercrombie. Because I have a feeling that they won't, but who knows. Next one. Perhaps my favourite read of the year, perhaps the most fun and well-written fantasy book of all time. What? That is wild. I would read 1,000 more books of just the Chapel of Holy Expediency having lunch. Every single character is interesting and you don't even learn half the backstories. James Cameron, get your filthy hands out of this eventual movie script and go back to the bottom of the ocean where you belong. Okay, that's kind of random. Yeah, I mean, definitely not the most well-written fantasy book of all time. That is absurd. I'm sorry. That is absolutely ridiculous. Are you seriously trying to tell me that this book is better than Before They Are Hanged or Heroes or The Trouble with Peace? Like, come on. Be serious, folks. It is wild to me that people are making this out to be some sort of incredible fantasy book. I could see people saying that this is like the funnest fantasy book that they've read of all time. I mean, even that, I completely disagree with that. I don't understand how people find this book fun. But I could somewhat understand that because this book really does read like popcorn fiction. It is so poorly written, but it is very easy to read. And so I can see why somebody might say that. But to say that it is the most well-written fantasy book of all time is honestly crazy to me. It is absolutely crazy to me. But there we go. We all have our opinions, I guess. The next one, I've only got a couple more left. So much fun. I love Abercrombie's work and this is him at his best, in my opinion. I'm really curious like how many of Abercrombie's books this person has read, because again, that is wild to me. It's absolutely wild to me that people can say that this is his best. I mentioned earlier that I think a certain type of person would really love this book. And I think if you're the type of person that loves like really fast-paced, kind of very disordered kind of writing that somehow still manages to keep you in, then I think you will like this book and I think you'll really enjoy it. But I think if you like something that is much more thoughtful and less obvious, then I don't think you will enjoy it as much as the people in this video that I'm quoting in this video. To me, The Devils seems like it was written for an American audience, whereas The First Law was written for a British audience. And I think that is because there are very much some cultural differences in terms of our humour and also in terms of the writing style. And this, to me, if I didn't know Joe Abercrombie was British, I 100% would have said that this was written by an American author. Whereas if you gave me First Law, I know for a fact that that was written by a British author. So that's a very interesting kind of thing to think about. Like, even though the US and the UK both speak English, we have, you know, some cultural similarities. In fact, I think we actually have a lot of very big differences as well. And I think that shows in this book, in my opinion. I went off on a little tangent there, but it's an interesting point to raise, I think. Next one. Going into this book, I never would have thought the word I would use to describe it would be delightful, but it was delightful. Filled with great characters, good banter, dark humour, and a large amount of gory violence, it was just a lot of fun. Highly recommend the audiobook. The different vocal character representation adds so much to the story. Yeah, I've heard great things about Stephen Pacey, so cool. Who I believe also did the narration for The Devils. I think this review is fine, like fine. I think if you find it fun and you like the humour, fine. But I think for people who are already existing Joe Abercrombie fans, I think they will genuinely notice like the differences in humour, because there is a very big difference, a very big gulf, in my opinion, between his previous books and this book. And that's not to say that authors shouldn't try new things, by the way. I absolutely encourage authors to try new things and kind of figure out what they really like. But I think Joe Abercrombie has such a distinct voice. This just did not feel like a Joe Abercrombie book, in my opinion. All right, 3 more left. Wow, one of the most engrossing and enjoyable reads I have had in a while. I immediately fell in love with the cast of characters, and I think they are this book's strongest point. Completely disagree. Everything else is incredibly solid with great payoffs. It is kind of all there. I originally had a different review where I took a star off for the ending, but in the intervening 24 hours, I've come around and can properly appreciate it. The Devils is an easy 5 out of 5, and I'll be recommending it to everyone who will listen. Interesting. to me, the characters are like the worst part. Like, they're these very cliche character types that you would expect in a kind of ragtag group of people kind of getting together to do a mission. It is very much like Suicide Squad. I just felt like the characters, or the writing I should say, was trying far too hard. They come off as like edgy edgelords, and I just didn't feel like they had the level of nuance that you even get in the first law book, which is the Blade itself. Like, there is so much detail that you get from the characters in that book. It is honestly quite remarkable. So much so that people don't like that book because it is very much about setup. Whereas this book, I think maybe it was trying to do too much. I don't think we really get a good sense of the characters, in my opinion. They just felt like cookie cutter, kind of edgy characters that I come to expect in a lot of Grimm's arc now. It's honestly why I've stayed away from the genre for a while. And it's really sad to see one of my favourite authors of all time fall into that trap. But clearly it worked, so who am I to say this stuff, right? I'm just one random opinion on the internet. All right, we've got two more left. I think these two are quite short. Stunning, unusual, funny, and brutal. I do not think this book is stunning at all. I think it's unusual in a bad way, in the sense that it's so out of character for this author. And I think he actually did like a bit of a cell phone, to be honest. And I think he's potentially alienated a very core, loyal group of his fan base. I really do think this book was written just to get a movie deal. And I can't help but let that kind of impact my opinion on this author. Not to say that I will not read his stuff going forward, because I absolutely will, though I will not touch The Devils. So that's taken me out for the next couple of years in terms of the stuff that he's producing. But I really don't like it when it feels like an author is going for a cash grab. I'm not saying that he is, but it feels like it to me. That might not have been his intent, to be very clear, but this feels like he's placating to a very specific group of people. And again, it worked, so fair play to him. And ultimately, you know, if you're an author, selling books is your job, right? So I do get it as well to some degree, but I can't help but have a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, to be honest. It's also the most unfunny book at all. And it is brutal, but like in a very obvious way. Whereas I think in his other books, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of violence, but the most brutal aspects are like the quiet moments, the little interactions that we have between characters, the realizations that characters have. Those are the most brutal moments. And this is just like, let's chop some people's heads off. Great. It's just gratuitous for like absolutely zero reason. And a lot of Grimdark is like that. But in my opinion, the best Grimdark has nuance to it, and this book most certainly has zero nuance. Let's keep going. So this is the final one. Joe Abercrombie never clicked with me until this book. I really love this book, and I think that reinforces the point that I made earlier. I think this book is not for people, or most people, or even a small group of people who love what makes First Law really special. That is a really special series, in my opinion. And I'm going to do a reread of it potentially next year, because I just want to kind of experience it again. But I do think he was targeting a different group of people as it relates to the writing style and how he wrote the characters. Because I literally couldn't pick two more different series. They're very similar in many regards, but they are so different in terms of how they're written and how they develop, how the characters are portrayed. Like, they're so different. So I think he was trying something new. It worked, which, you know, good for him. But at the same time, I really hope this isn't the standard that Joe Abercrombie is going to hold himself to going forward, because that means I'm probably never going to read another Joe Abercrombie book ever again. So there we go. That's it, folks. Those are my reactions. I still can't believe I gave this book a 1 star. And I can't believe that I had such a bad experience, given that it is one of my favourite authors of all time. It is what it is. I still love those books. They still have a very special place in my heart, and I will never forget them for getting me through some pretty difficult times. And also just because I just love the characters. They're just so good. But I am still very sour about this book. After this video, I never want to think about that book or that series ever again. So this will probably be the last time that I talk about it. I'll probably mention it once or twice in like future videos, especially like end of year videos. But apart from that, I don't think I'll be talking about it anytime soon. Let me know down below in the comments if you like this book, If you dislike this book, there is a very small contingent of us that didn't like it, and I will see you down below in the comments. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.